My husband Brad was born with congenital heart disease that was fairly well managed most of his life. And probably in 2007, his heart failure symptoms started getting worse and more serious. He was always seen at Children's Hospital. When the discussion started coming up about a possible transplant, it was his longtime doctors at Children's that told Brad and I transplant was in the future. We didn't realize the near future. It's sort of like science fiction. It's one of those things that we know is done in this country. However, the fact that it's actually going to be happening in your family and to your husband, it takes a while to sort of wrap your brain around that. The information that we received and what the doctor's best judgment was that my husband would be best served and best cared for at Brigham and Women's because they would be able to manage the complexity of heart disease that he was going in with and the complications that might arise afterwards, given the fact that he had had a lifetime of heart disease and had had prior open heart surgeries. We were scheduled to have an appointment, but Brad had gotten very sick that weekend, and we actually arrived in an ambulance because he would not have made it in a car. It would have taken too long. Fortunately, he was listed at Brigham and Women's, and we began sort of our wait for when that day would come, that they would find a match for him. During the time that we were waiting in the hospital, Brad continued to get sicker and weaker, and that is not the best case scenario for going into a major surgery. And the transplant team at Brigham and Women's did was come up with a plan that was going to get Brad one step closer to transplant because they realized he was running out of time as far as what the actual medicines could do. We actually started staying in the hospital beginning in March, and his wait until a donor heart became available would be spent at Brigham and Women's. In late May, a donor heart became available that was a match for Brad, and we were very excited. So we went into the surgery knowing the risks, but also very excited about what it was going to mean for our future, that we would have more time together and more quality time together. And we met with the entire team of transplant doctors, nurses, social workers, and we're just so well taken care of by all of them and walked through the whole process. All our hopes and our shot at more time together was really being pinned on the medical staff at Brigham and Women's. My husband and I had a lot of family support, but we also had a lot of support from the nurses and the doctors themselves. And Brad remained intubated and unable to communicate verbally for quite a period of time. So my job at that point became not only to be his advocate, but also to be his voice. The doctors and the surgeons, even when Brad couldn't communicate with them, would come to the bedside, would put their hand on his and speak to both of us, but also recognize that Brad was still in the room even though he couldn't communicate, and just have some kind words or words of encouragement. The doctors had a real humanity about them. So you had that sense that once they left your room, there was further conversation with other members of the transplant team as far as what would be the best thing to do next to help Brad and Mandy get through this. So I really felt like we were working with the best cardiologists in the country to manage the complexity of Brad's heart disease and the transplant itself, as well as the serious complications that occurred after the transplant surgery. Since then, he's been back to work, back to the fire department in our town. We can travel. We were able to take our first trip outside of the country, things that we could never have even thought about doing before the transplant. We're actually going to be celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary in December, something that we weren't sure we'd make, just a year ago. I think being able to relate to the Brigham and Women doctors and nurses above and beyond the medical aspect was sort of what got us through and what got me through what was the hardest experience of our life, that they really attend to sort of the whole person, the medical needs, the emotional needs, and the social part. It's just how fortunate we were to be at Brigham and Women's, to meet those people and have them working together to save my husband's life, to save our time together, and to get us home. Not many people our age come kind of face to face with possibly having to say goodbye. But we have been given such an amazing gift, a second chance, really a whole new life for Brad. Brigham and Women's did everything possible for my husband.